Hey YouTube, so this video is going to be different from my normal lecture style videos. It's much more of an open conversation about starting a business, entrepreneurship, investing, current events, and just business ideas that you can actually start. So since you've never seen me do a conversation like this before, what I want you to do is go to the chapters in the description and click on one that sends out to you that you're going to find engaging. I guarantee you'll enjoy it and you'll learn something new. Go watch that. It's a few minutes of your time if you enjoy it. Then go and watch the full episode. But otherwise, just all you're risking is a few minutes of your time. And again, we're talking about getting into entrepreneurship when you're young, investing, current events, and so on. So a lot of information here, and let us know what you want to see in the comments. And with that said, let's get into the episode. No one knows you either. I think this is the first time you've appeared.
I did appear in the IV video just for a second.
You were
That
that was fun. The agency speed run. Can you just intro yourself? Like, who are you? How do you know me?
How would I describe myself?
Yeah.
Well, my name is Blake Reynolds Martin. And John and I have been best friends since really I'd claim middle school. He really remembers me for the first part of freshman year. I guess I got more interesting in high school, but basically since we were just kids. And yeah, I like to obsess over things I find interesting. Typically ends up being in the realm of business. Accidentally sales. I'm not too passionate about sales, but that's how I've kind of gone my way through actually, generating some income, doing some business, and then really interested as well in just, conversations like these and a lot that's covered on this channel. So that's why I thought it would be maybe a good idea to throw out this conversation and do it with John.
So we haven't caught up in a while. I think, Blake, it has just been a few weeks now. You put a few notes on just this sheet we have. Where do you want to start, or what stands out to you as far as just what's been going on with you, or what's going through your head?
Yeah. Well, okay, I'd like to start with kind of the more Becker type talking. And for context, Alex Becker, he's a YouTube guru, talks a lot about the minimalistic lifestyle. And really it's something that's came kind of to fruition recently with me, because I think that it's to combine. Alex Ramosi says sort of, if you have a 10-year goal, it'll take you 10 years. That's the simplest way to say it. And so what I feel like recently in my life I kind of set out to do is that 10-year goal, later realizing that what could have been the 1-year goal, which is, a skill set that I've developed trying to do the 10-year goal. Well, the 10-year goal didn't necessarily fail, but I didn't realize that when you have such a large goal, you actually achieve a pretty significant output along the way, just 1/10 of the way through. So the thing Alex Becker talks about and how it relates to this is he kind of says when you start entrepreneurship, and I think a lot of people that probably watch this channel are relatively, they're either in entrepreneurship, relatively new. A lot of people go to YouTube for new, for content on business if they're a little bit newer. And so what I found interesting, and something I kind of want to tell my younger self, is Alex and I guess Alex Becker and Alex Hormozi, the two Alexes, they said a lot that you just fail and then you try something else and you fail again. And then you just keep trying new things, you keep failing. And then eventually you get so fed up with failing that you figure out what failed the least, what kind of worked a little bit. And you realize the only reason that kind of worked is because you were a little bit better at it naturally. And then you just decide, that's my thing, I'm going to fail at that for a very long time. You continue to fail at it until you get those little nuggets of success, little, realizations along the way. And I think Alex describes this part where you finally see non-ambiguous results and why they happened through these failures. And it's a blindsided, I guess, view on what success actually looks like. Honestly, this feeling that it's almost not deserving. It's like once you kind of see the light, you almost feel you don't deserve it. and it's through these series.
Right.
So that's to start it off, because I think anyone who feels like there's too much ambiguity in entrepreneurship, the point is there is a lot of ambiguity, and I wanted to bring up that idea. So that's just my little spiel. But I mean, John, how do you see what I said applying to what you've been through, or maybe a different iteration of it?
Well, a few questions there. First off, when you say desire, what do you mean, or deserve? Who's deserving of what, or doesn't feel that they deserve what? Can you elaborate there?
Yeah, so basically, like, I realized when I was new, everything I tried I thought would work, and I'd almost convince myself why it could possibly work. I'd get optimistic about things that ended up not being the way I thought. And what I realized was I had this kind of broken calculator of what I was, I guess, spending my time on. And I think recently, I mean, just for context, a big part of my background is cold calls, sales, and we were trying to do cold calls and sales for SubHub, product that it's being worked on. It's a little early market, but it's very hard to push a product that's early market. Um, and when we pivoted to use our skill sets that we had developed on something that was nearly impossible, we had accidentally built sort of an impossible product via trying to do the impossible task. So when we pivoted from the impossible task, we had realized that we had accidentally built that like impossible product. So what I mean by it feels kind of like you don't deserve it is my reward system's flipped, as in I assume everything will fail. Because there's so much failure that you almost fall in love with your environment. You get used to your environment. So when you see the light, you see something start to work, you almost don't enjoy that because your environment is just constant failure. And so that's why that's why it doesn't feel like you deserve that success, because you're not ready for change in the output, if that makes sense.
So, Blake, do you remember how I told you about that engineer that I was sitting on a flight next to when I was flying back from Puerto Rico to Boston last month?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so he worked a lot in data and was telling me all about how everyone's data is out there nowadays and how just dangerous kind of the online environment is. And I think that connects really well to something that I've been using for a while now, and that's Surfshark VPN. The analogy out there is that Surfshark is like wearing pants, where all the important stuff stays private and secure when you step foot outside, just in this case, in a digital sense. What the Surfshark VPN does is it keeps all of your information encrypted and safe from trackers and hackers that are really everywhere nowadays. And that's what I was having the conversation about with this engineer on that flight. So for example, every time you connect to a public Wi-Fi network, say in a coffee shop, and Blake, you'll love this as well. What I love about Surfshark is that prices around the world actually differ depending on the country you're in, right? So that's like price discrimination and economics. So for example, a product you buy in the US may be marked up compared to the price in Japan. So if you use the Surfshark VPN, you can actually directly save money on products where those prices are different in different countries, right? That immediately can make you or just save you money. For some quick facts as well, right? With Surfshark, you get unlimited devices. You also get access to over 3,000 servers across 100 countries. And you do get 24/7 customer support there as well. There's also Surfshark Alert and Surfshark Antivirus, and those can give you data breach alerts so that you know when your online information is being leaked. And again, that does really, especially nowadays, happen all the time. And that also gives you, through Surfshark Antivirus, total security on all of your online assets, whether that's your webcam or your files. So you can go to HTTPS, right? Just surfshark.com/JohnLaw. That's surfshark.com/JONLAW for 4 extra months of Surfshark for free. And there's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So there's really no risk for you to just try Surfshark and keep your online information secure. Again, that is surfshark.com/JohnLaw for 4 extra months of Surfshark, and you can also just click that link in the description. And with that said, let's just get back into the video. Sure. Well, I find for you and I both, I think you, like you say, we did think things would work when we started, or it's kind of like you watch the video online, and you're like, oh my God, my drop shipping store in 3 clicks is gonna take off. And same with just I think especially anything that's just popular online. But is that almost necessary is the question I have. Is that the requisite to get people to start? In that if sure, if you've been doing it, anything of that sort, and anything just remotely challenging, just to generalize it for a while, you don't your reward cycle likely isn't associated with success. Otherwise, you would have stopped.
Mhm.
If your reward cycle, like how can you get people to start something which would be good for them? Or for example, let's take the gym as a concept. If people enjoy the gym from day one, if they're like, yeah, I get to go work out with a friend, do a workout I like, I'm not dying from day one, they're much more likely to go into the gym versus if you go and you kill them on the first day and then the second day and the third day and every day for 5 years, how likely are they to stay in the gym? So to throw that back at you, is that fallacious element of, hey, this is going to work necessary? Should it remain there to get people to do things in the first place, even if you're doomed to failure in a sense?
Yeah. So are you kind of asking should that I guess the light, even if it's like, are you kind of saying, like, for example, let's say you see you're on a run, you see light at the end of the tunnel, you think it's a mile away, and you're like, I can handle a mile, and you realize every mile it's actually a mile farther than you thought, and when you're done with the run, it ended up being 10 miles, but guess what? You just ran 10 miles. Congratulations, right? So it's like succeeding in entrepreneurship is kind of like running the 10 miles, thinking every time it was 1 mile, right? Because it just, you continue to iterate. That's what I find so interesting about it. Like, I remember, John, like, remember when I told you when I dropped out like a year ago, I was like, this is how I'm gonna learn. Is entrepreneurship possible or is it not? That's what I thought it was, and it's not that at all. It's not that, like, oh, is it a thing that some people are built for? It's not. Is it a lucky? Is it a not? I'm neither confident nor non-confident on any goal anymore because I've realized obtaining a goal is just having a complete set of information that you can then. It's kind of like Hormozy says, God is just making reality happen with the shortest amount of time possible. So the closer you can make something happen, the closer you are to being God, in the sense. So it's kind of like, if that all that's moving you and God is just your ability to do so and your information stemming from information, then it's really just entrepreneurship to me is really just paying off that ignorance tax of just continuing to iterate off of the 5% success and the 95% failure in every single output until those 5% successes stack until the actual light of the tunnel that you walk through. And I think the reason it feels that way is because it's like you've realized for 9 miles it's a mile away, and you're sitting at mile 9 and you're like, wait a minute, for 9 miles I thought it was a mile away, it's not, so it must be 20 miles away. And then you walk through the last mile and you're just like, I just walked 9 miles, how did I just go through the last mile? It should be 10 miles away. So that's do you kind of get the analogy there?
Yeah, I do. And when you say God, I assume you're tying that to the notion of being all powerful and just
Yeah,
yeah. So
exactly.
yeah, exactly. I think that's fair. You also had that note on starting from scratch that I think ties into what you're saying here. So what do you mean what did you say here? Can anyone really start from scratch nowadays? Because I'd be very concerned if people can't.
Yeah, no. It's just like, what I realized is just like I posted a video that was like how I'd restart from scratch. and I kind of regret that video because while it showed a lot of some of the things I've done, found out, realized, etc. If I tried to start from scratch on that model that I was talking about, I think I'd probably fail. Uh, I think there's a very specific model, if any, I can succeed at. I'm only really 2, 3 years into this thing, and so I think the reason I'm saying that is because it's kind of like if the agency model is for the most part dead unless you want to work for free case studies for years or however long that takes, what is really the next agency model in today's day and age? And that's kind of the question. So I'll throw that at you. What do you think is the current modern day agency or SEO when SEO was like you could make 25K per month off your time, or like, the newer start agency type that you can start up without, pay your ignorance tax off fast and get revenue? What do you think?
Yeah, I have an issue there, I think, with just the whole notion of finding the next agency model, and that premise, or just approaching any sort of business from that perspective, inherently is like, what's the easiest to get into? What's likely the easiest to succeed at? What's the easiest way to get money? And if you approach these things as what's the easiest way to make money and what has the fewest barriers to entry, that's like that eliminates 99% of what actually is going to work long term, because the things that work long term aren't the ones that are just going to be that easy to get into in the short term. And if you then try and play the trends, right, then that's the same problem as trying to trade off of trends, or like you're gambling essentially at that point. And I think the what you said there is that, well, the ignorance tax, like, well, I think a counterpoint there is you need something with a low barrier to entry to pay off the ignorance tax. The question I would ask is, well, how valuable is paying off that ignorance tax if it's in a field, if it's in something which is almost doomed to fail, and that if you go off any of the popularized models, just it doesn't work for most people. And I don't see that differing from going into any quote unquote traditional career path. For example, if you go and get a sales job at a consulting firm versus try and start an agency and cold call for it, you can apply yourself to cold calling in both of those spheres. If you try and get into the agency model, though, it's hyper-saturated. Everyone's trying to doing it. You're really focused on the cash. You're probably going to burn out. The consulting path, meanwhile, you're getting paid to do it. It's just very structured in the sense that there's freedom for you to just scale it up, but you have the base structure to go into the office, to learn from people, and so on. So I'd push back on just the whole notion there of any single model where you implicitly try or want to time it, and also you're focused on the cash. So do you see what I'm saying there?
I see what you're saying, but I think what I wrote there and what I said there was, what's the new model to start from scratch? So starting from scratch could be, get $1,000 per month quick, not necessarily get rich quick. When the agency model started, it was low barrier to entry and then pretty fast scale compared to the average person, who makes the average amount of money in the economy, right? You could work for a month, 2 months on the side. Now you get a client or two. Now you're at 5K per month. You quit your job. Now you just do that 5x the volume. Right now you're making some kind of 15K per month. That's what it used to be. Now I think it's absolutely zero until you eventually take off. So I'm saying, what is the new model that's similar to that, where it's like low barrier to entry, as in you can enter the model and get results relatively quick as that light at the end of the tunnel. And even if the light is still 10 miles, what can symbolize that light at an early stage to get someone started in entrepreneurship?
Yeah. I see two contrasting trends. I think the first there is the notion that as technology comes into play and as kind of the whole world comes online, then the number of you can think that you can fundamentally think of this as a form of arbitrage, right? And that you're trying to find things where there's a low barrier to entry, which if you can get results and there's a low barrier to entry, there has to be something that hasn't been arbitraged out there for any number of reasons. Just because if it was free money, then everyone would be doing it. And so I think you can argue that as, for example, like 500 million people in the third world get computers and start working, well, suddenly there's just that doesn't exist anymore. And the barrier to entry just, keeps going up in that way. I think the alternative trend or perspective to that is that they're the same and they will be the same for a very long time. And that being a really good, say, like going off your background, cold caller and being really good at sales is still a very hard thing with a low barrier to entry. And it was 10 years ago, it will be in 10 years. And the same applies to, for example, like content creation, in that the skill of content creation in my mind is really, can you keep someone's attention for 15 seconds? If you can do that and you can do it successfully, billions of views are yours, right? Because you just make a 15-second video that people on average watch for 15, 20 plus seconds if they rewatch or share it, and the world's yours. And that was true 10 years ago. It's still true today, and it's still incredibly difficult, and the bar hasn't been raised that much.
Yeah.
So I think I had a very different answer as far as the model goes, depending on kind of those two arguments. But do you have a model in in
A
mind?
model in mind. Yeah. Well, not a model in mind. I think it's really just, I think it's two things. Obviously, what are you inherently good at? Like, I'll be upfront. It's not like I worked hard at all to be where I'm at in sales. I actually haven't worked that hard. I've worked way harder in every area in business than I have sales. Sales has always just been natural to me. Um, so so that's the one point, right? If the only thing I can claim I'm good at is sales, and ironically I haven't actually worked that hard for it, well, what should you choose? The thing you're good at. But then also, I think I've had this.
If I can
Yeah.
interrupt there, when you say you haven't worked hard at it, you have made what, 20, 30,000 cold calls in a year and a half when you didn't have to. So is that
Yeah, but I'd say maybe not 20. But I made a good point. So like I think the ratio in time I've spent on strictly cold calls versus other aspects of work is probably 1 to 4. And I think what's came output wise of all 3/4 of those hours is in the short term, probably half of cold calls, but in the long term, it's everything, right? So it's kind of like, I guess my point is, like, if I had 4x those cold calls and done only cold calls since then, right, then I'd be sitting in a different type of apartment right now. So it's just like, how do you want to play that game, ratio wise, with the things that benefit you years down the line versus now. But then the second thing to being, pretty decent at the thing you start at, it's really just, I've had this obsession lately over non-ambiguous, just I maybe call them systems. And what I kind of mean by that is just like the idea that if you can confine all variables in between an input and an output, and you can combine those variables with absolutely no external variables that you don't know, and you can build something that has an output goal that will hit it every time based off that input. If you can build that and that output's valuable to someone in this world, you'll be a millionaire. It's just period. And so that's the obsession I've had, because I think throughout my entire life I've tried these ideas, building these things, and I mean, of course it's going to be ambiguous. There's millions of variables in most things in this world, and I think when I look at the people who have succeeded through kind of the grind more so than the luck, it really just does come down to that, just the 10,000 hours that went to nothing, it felt like in the beginning. And then they just look back years after and they realize it all went to something. Yeah, I kind of made 2 points with that just there. But yeah, so I guess that's more my point. I think you asked, like, basically, like, what does the model look like? I don't think it's a model. I think it's just, what are you good at? Okay, is it ambiguous, or does it have a lot of ambiguity? Like, can you understand exactly why it works if you make it work? So I think that was one of the issues when, John and I started WCM in the agency. Like, I made a lot of cold calls in the beginning. Actually, a lot of sales came from that, but I couldn't repeat those results because I didn't know what, benefited those few meetings, those few cold calls that closed those deals. Um, and so it took really until now to understand what it takes to do that. And even now, I don't think I know the full truth, but maybe a couple years from now I will. So yeah, that's my little spiel.
Yeah.
But not to change the topic here. But John, I've been so curious on your list. I just want to make sure this one thing is covered because
Sure.
I just wanted to hear this so bad. What is Amazon AI sex appeal?
Sure. So for context here, we have a list of notes of just things we could kind of talk about here or want to share. One of those is Amazon AI sex appeal. So for context, as you know, Blake, I've been writing books for a long time. One of the early books I put out was The Modern Guide to Stock Market Investing for Teens, which is a book about investing for teenagers, just the basics of the stock market, how to invest, how to open an account, how to budget, and so on. That book has been on Amazon for how many years now? I think it was 2020 when it came out, so close to 5 years now, which is actually scary. And it has 250 reviews. It sells maybe a few hundred copies a month through Amazon to this day. And if you go and look at the sales page, and I did this a few months ago, I want to just looked at the sales page for the book, and then you scroll down, you see this very strange. Let me see if I can even find it here, so I can.
You might share your screen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so here I will share my screen. Hold on. I sent a request to you. So Amazon has some sort of AI now that kind of summarizes reviews and then gives you kind of a predictive summary of what matters. So again, this is the stock market book, again, for teenagers. If I scroll down here, right, we have reviews from other authors. We have 220 reviews. Then we have select to learn more, readability, and sex appeal. And that Amazon's AI took this this book for teenagers and then stuck a sex appeal tab on there, which genuinely, as a writer, like, I don't want this to be associated with my work. And then you expand that and it says 3 customers mentioned sex appeal. And then there's nothing here related to that. So my genuine just question is, how is Amazon's AI so bad, or whatever machine they're using to do this, that they stuck a sex appeal tab or like indexing label on a book for teenagers that's about investing? I've had problems with Amazon. This crosses the line, and there's nothing I can do in terms of contacting support. So consider this a PSA.
You should call out Jeff Bezos right now for a boxing match.
Yeah, he's been on TRT for a few years now. Man is just buff.
Man is buff. But does that make you like is it like steroids where you get flaccid in all areas after?
Well, it's testosterone replacement therapy. So it just, if you stay on it, no, it's not going to do anything south for you. And it is much more typically of a long-term kind of quote unquote therapy versus a traditional steroid. And that a lot of people use it just for medical reasons.
Interesting.
So no, he'll be peak strength right now, assuming his cycle the amount he's taking has stayed the same. But have you seen photos of Bezos?
I haven't recently.
Yeah.
No, I should check that.
Well, it's interesting. He just told the Washington Post which he owns, to not endorse a candidate for the election.
To not endorse a candidate?
A candidate for the election, and they've done so since, I think, Clinton. So for like 30, 40 years now, they've elected all Democratic candidates, and then he said, nope, we're going back to our roots and we're not endorsing anyone for president, which people think he's positioning for a Trump win, so that he's saying, well, if we don't endorse right, the loser, then for all the space programs, like for Blue Origin, where he has government contracts, then there won't be any kind of retribution from the Trump party in the case of a win. So
Do you think the
that,
billionaires want like Zuckerberg has commented, previous Democrat commented, on that interview, he felt American watching the, Trump assassination or whatever. Do you think a lot of these obviously Musk, the recent, stuff he's been doing, do you think that a lot of those previously kind of left-leaning philanthropy types now maintain philanthropy, humane I guess, interest while still supporting that side that previously is sort of alienated in the world that they're in, if that makes sense?
yeah, well, so there was a study that came out actually where they looked at VCs and generally just wealthy individuals. I think it might have been VC and private equity focused. I'll try and find a link for that. And if you look at they graphed the distribution of conservatives versus liberals among that kind of wealthy elite and that influential elite. 20 years ago, obviously, it was all leftists, it was all Democrats. And then you look even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, all leftists. This last election, this recent election is coming up in just what, a week now, that did a reverse, right? That shifted. What's interesting as well is that if you look at the distribution of wealth, though, among the two parties, there's been this switch in the last 50 or so years, whereas the Republicans used to be the elitist party that had all the money and the power, and the Democrats were the party of the working men, right? Like the unions, labor, they're all on the left. And then now, if you look at the share of wealth held by the left versus the right, it did this 180. So now, in a sense, the Democrats, in however you want to take that, but they have become the elitist or kind of the party with the power. And then perhaps as a leading indicator, and I think that's kind of the critical question there, is this a leading or kind of a lagging indicator? The wealthy people seem to be like the VCs, et cetera, are going back to the right. So if that's lagging the general kind of power just dichotomy here, then maybe that does really say something about the election. That ties into something that I wanted to talk to you about.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Polymarket?
Yeah, isn't it like the gambling, like residential stuff?
Exactly. So it's a crypto, I think it's Polygon backed betting website where anyone can propose something that can be bet upon. So it can be politics, crypto, science related, and then you can go and you can kind of trade that and you can bet on it.
Mm.
So a few weeks ago, I was like, I want to try this. I want to have some fun. Just want to just really learn about the platform. So I put a few dollars on like literally 10, $20 just to feel around the platform. I made, I think, 30 something percent in like 2 weeks. And I was 10 for 11 in my bets. And I was like 95% correct on the bets I was making. So actually, I probably should not share my whole betting portfolio. But I'm
Not
now
fine.
what I consider stage two of my gambling addiction, which I put a few $100s in, and I'm giving myself another few weeks to bet and see if I can maintain that kind of standard of accuracy there. And I'm already up another like 15, 20% in a week or two, which is I'm not telling anyone to gamble. I'm not uh advising anything of the sort. But it's fun that you can bet on just science and weather and business and foreign affairs, right? Like,
Yeah,
Owen, of course.
yeah, yeah.
Um, he studies political science, foreign affairs, et cetera, and that's just his hobby, right? So I saw this poll that was what's going to happen in the Georgian elections. And it was like 50-50, like this party will win versus this party. Owen was like, he saw that bet on my screen and went, "Oh no, I have a friend." They're like, "This party is 100% going to win." He was so confident. So I put some money in there, and then the next day it was like, "Oh, he was right. It was double my money."
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
interesting.
fun.
I wonder if you could like set up like Wait, I don't understand enough about it, but like if you'd imagine if you're is what you're kind of saying is like insider information is more accessible in poly market because that was in a sense insider information. So what if you set up like
It's,
shops around the world, just had that information and cycled it through?
I think in any public market, you have to assume that there's really not much private information at play that hasn't been arbitraged out. Uh, for example, if let's say about the election right now you're sitting at 65-35 odds, I think, on Poly Market for the US elections. If anyone was 100% confident that they'd win, and not just confident on a personal level, but they had insider information where they knew that a given party would win, they would go and raise hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, put it all in there, like leverage themselves to the max because they
Yeah.
know they're going to triple or three, 5, 10x their money. So I think there's two ways to trade on Poly Market or anything like that. First of all, generally, I think it is gambling, so it's not like a serious investing strategy. But I think you can bet on very high probability events. So, for example, let's say something is 95% likely to happen, and then just you have to assume that some people are going to invest just because 1 in 10 times they're going to 50x their money because they bet on a 98-2 spread or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. So you can bet on the 95s and just take a 5% win and just keep doing that with a small part of your portfolio, right? So you just make 10 bets that are 95-5. Alternatively, and this is what I've been doing, is just placing kind of spread bets as opposed to just betting in one direction. So for example, there was the Joe Rogan Trump episode that like just came out.
Yeah.
I've watched like or listened to a good amount of Rogan episodes, so I had a feeling of what kind of words or subjects that they touch on. So I bet, and there were some words where it was like 80-20, they're going to say it, and other words where it was 20-80, they won't say it, right? And I placed a bet going that let's say $30 on an 80% probability that something will be said, and then $20 on the 80% probability that something won't be said. So I can put more money in, but kind of hedge the downside a little bit if I want to, not by putting less money in, but by putting a smaller amount of money to kind of like the inverse. So it's the same as like the condor strategies and options, betting if you're familiar with those.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. You get on this thing. Did you see that there's a 65% 65 to 35 on the US presidential election
Yeah, that
for Trump?
for Trump, it's there's been a
Huh.
big shift in momentum in the last few weeks, regardless of how you feel about the election. But I want to stress that is very different from polls. For example, it might be, let's say, 51-49 Trump in 5 of the 6 swing states. And if you're confident in that number, or for example, that he leads nationally by a 2% spread, then on Poly Market, it should be 100-0 if that was the consensus, right? So these are two fundamentally different trading mechanisms. I think what is really interesting about Poly Market is less so the absolute numbers and more so the kind of trend, kind of the signals that it represents in that case, because you can't really say that there's a 65% chance that he wins, and that correlates with, say, poll numbers. But you can say if it used to be 50% 2 weeks ago and now it's 65%, a lot of people, since there are billions of dollars being put into specifically that bet, are more confident that he's going to win versus 2 weeks ago. So it's interesting if you see what I'm saying, like trend means of analyzing trends there, because people are really putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah. But you once said if whoever wins Pennsylvania has what, like an 85% chance, and
I'd need to fact check that, but I did see that somewhere. Yeah.
so maybe a lot of this is just him or the election shifting in that state specifically because 85% chance will impact the entire betting odds. You know. After
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there is just a lot of just a vibe shift. And what's really interesting as well, I don't know if you saw the Rogan, the Trump conversation that got 30 million views in a day on YouTube. Like forget Spotify, right? But these are Mr. Beast numbers that those interviews
yeah,
are. And
wow.
just in terms
I
of
didn't think it-
reach, yeah, and publicity, like that's only coming from one side, and that can't be hurting that side more than it benefits them. So
Was it live?
no.
Okay.
Um,
Musk was live. I wasn't sure.
Musk he's been doing a lot politically, which is
Yeah.
I feel like he's been boxed into a corner where he feels like he has to. And at the end of the day, I think regardless of how you feel about politics in the US, the notion of a business person, a technologist having to become political because he's scared of retribution on one side from one side is just not a healthy thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well I mean, didn't he say the opposite of that for a lot of people supporting like people apparently things with not to get conspiratorial or whatever the word would be. But did you hear the thing he said on all the Epstein and Diddy cases being released if Trump is in office?
We're really hitting the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah, we really are.
I haven't seen that, but I'm sure in their mind there's Trump would be much more likely to do so versus
Yeah,
Kamala. So
yeah. Interesting.
we'll find out in 8 days, and I think
It's
that'll
really
be
in 8 days. Oh my God.
yeah, November 5th.
Wow. eight
So
days. The world goes crazy.
it'll be a I think intense few years
Yeah,
regardless. So
literally. I agree.
um, it should be good. I think there'll be a very noticeable bump in equities, gold, Bitcoin, et cetera, though, if Trump wins. And that's less so a function of spending and much more so a function of where that spending goes. In that Trump is more likely, given his kind of stated plans, to spend money in ways that benefits the economy versus Kamala, again, just as a nonpartisan individual, just going off what they put out there. So we'll make money if he wins in the short term. And I think there's an interesting conversation there too about inflation and how the Fed is dealing with potentially having raised rates a little too much or a little too fast. So in that regard too, it'll be an interesting month. And we were going to have a conversation about stocks actually, right? Because I think you're getting more into it. But I have like two that are up 50% this month, and there's a lot that have been just
Really?
huh?
I said really, like just
Yeah.
the
It's it's
market.
it's been a pretty hot month for stocks overall, at least my portfolio.
Hmm.
So we'll see. It's not sustainable at some point, but I think if Trump wins, given the way that spending is allocated, it will be sustainable for a little bit, or people will interpret it in that way.
Yeah. What were the two types of companies for the 50%? Were those like more risky companies or?
No, SoFi was one of them, which is a banking
Yeah.
a banking stock, and they're one of the high kind of growth bank stocks for sure. But I bought into them a month ago. I haven't even been holding them for a while, and it was immediately just vertical. And Celsius has done really well. I don't know if that's 50%, but that's I think
Celsius?
30, yeah, it's Celsius right here.
Brand? Wow.
Brands. Yeah, they've been doing really well, and I think what's interesting about Celsius is that they dominate on the East Coast, right? Like Boston, New York,
Yeah.
they're
I know
everywhere.
Boston.
But for most of these other drink brands, internationally is where most of their products are sold, right? Just not in the US. And the argument with Celsius is that, well, they dominate on the East Coast. They're not on the West Coast, or they barely are, or just not as popular. They have zero market share globally.
Hmm.
So they're going to just expand into the whole world. They may be backed by Pepsi or something, since Pepsi especially doesn't have any stake like Coca-Cola does in any big energy drink brand. They're really trying to now, just going off kind of M&A and purchases they're making over the last year or so. If they just partner with Celsius or buy some of Celsius and start going out there, or buy more, I should say, of Celsius, that could be big as well. So
Huh.
yeah, but I'm investing in a lot of construction plays, just going off SubHub, like, right. We've done a lot of work in construction.
Yeah.
There's so much, and you can speak to this probably better than I can, but just pent up demand for onshoring and data centers and these big just plays that are going on in the U.S. manufacturing center or sector, that I'm putting as much money as I can just into a lot of the companies I think that are downstream of that supply chain. So I'd be curious to see if you would invest there as well.
Like construction companies like that build data centers?
Not necessarily construction, but materials companies. Mostly materials, partly more GC, like the actual builders as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I've been thinking about that lately. I was looking at like, different well, I mean, NVIDIA, and I have no idea about them. You know more about this than me, but I was just trying to figure out basically who does NVIDIA still buy from that they haven't just like, self-manufactured their own process. But not necessarily NVIDIA specifically, but really just any of these people that are really taking advantage of this new AI bubble or revolution or whatever you want to call it, and really just understanding like, yeah, the NVIDIAs, all the graphics card companies, they're going to get publicity. Maybe their stock's going to be where it's going to be equal to what the public knows. But what about companies that, sell to those NVIDIAs of the world, or somewhere previous in the supply chain? And I think those kind of things I'm really interested in. But I think I showed you one of them, and I didn't even take a look at the fact that, their revenue is very misaligned with their market cap. So it's like they're still definitely being taken into account being a tech company. So I guess it's just about diamonds in the rough.
Yeah, I think PDE's, like, price to earnings, does drastically vary by industry or sector. But if you look at comparable companies, it's like if I don't know, 10 general contractors are trading at an 8x price to earnings, like, PDE ratio, and this one's trading at 20x, like, that's a good thing, in that you have to ask the question of why, and that probably means they're doing something different or better than everyone else to justify that multiple. But also, if they're already at a 20x, is entropy going to pull them back down toward kind of the 8x, or is what differentiates them so that they have the 20x in the first place, is that going to push them higher? I think that's kind of like the dichotomy there.
Yeah. I want advice. I'm gonna ask you this, like, other than just having a genuine interest in stocks, like in terms of just leverage within accumulating wealth, would you suggest, someone like me, or someone watching that doesn't know as much like this, do you think it's high leverage enough to the point in which, spending the 5 hours a week or waking up and reading the 30 minutes a day is worth it? Or do you think just going all in on the one thing, say taking all the 10 hours a week I would spend on learning about stocks and just throwing it into sales, throwing it into scaling a sales team, which of those two worlds do you think makes just standard the most sense? Because of course it varies.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, right? Just to repeat that, generally, well, investing at best will make you rich slowly, like really, really rich very slowly. And a lot of other plays, especially if you're young, are going to make you money much faster. So should you not invest if you're young? But then to the flip side, well, if you don't start investing young, then you won't actually have that backup plan of getting rich slowly, so to speak. I think there is no correct kind of polar or extreme answer, so to speak, in that for the vast majority of people, you shouldn't never invest. You will be much worse off if you do that. And that's even like a lot of people keep money in checking accounts, right? Where they're
Yeah.
making nothing on their money, and that's just your straight up burning cash that way. Uh, but then the inverse isn't true as well, where I don't think investing should be your plan A. In that there's the whole strain of advice that's don't buy your coffee, put $6 a day into Starbucks stock, and after
Yeah.
20 years you'll have $160,000 and you'll be making $200 a month in dividends, for example. That's true, but if you wanted to hit a certain threshold of financial freedom that most people aspire to, for example, nowadays it's not $1 million. In the US, you need 3, 5, 7 million to comfortably, truly
Mhm.
retire, to put kids through college, to buy a house, and so on.
Yeah.
So you're not likely to get there by just spending a little bit less and investing more if you make, say, $40,000 a year. If you make $40,000 a year, get to 80,000 and then invest.
Yeah.
Get to 100,000 and then invest.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and I think that ultimately is the compromise there, where it's like don't do the dumb things like keep money in a checking account or gamble away all your money on options, and then focus, like allocate the majority of your effort toward just raising your earnings potential, your income threshold. But then as that starts to make money on the side, like do the right things, invest for the long term, and that really will compound. Like that is why like you should invest. And no matter how into entrepreneurship versus uh, just a traditional career path you are, it really doesn't matter. Just invest, like, period.
Yeah. Well, I think, even to extend off of that point of invest when make yourself, you're at 40, get to 80, then invest. You can just pay the person that already paid off the ignorance tax a microscopical amount compared to the thousands of hours they've spent, mastering their investing. So, an advisor of some sort. I really do think just you're at 80, get to 250. And now you're going to have access to the people that, are just going to be thousands of hours ahead of you. Why even start is kind of my thinking. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of when you speak to advisors, that's just YouTube nowadays. You forget financial advisors, just go to YouTube and watch some videos, and that will be most of the advice you need when it comes to investing. And there's an interesting stat actually about Boston University specifically, in that they asked students how much they expected to make when they graduated and got their first job, and then also polled people on how much they actually made who were, older. But I mean, in the same age group, right? And
Mm.
I don't want to misquote the numbers here, but from what I remember, and it's around these numbers for sure. Students expected to make like 80, 85 grand the moment their first job after they graduated. And in actuality, they were making 50 to 55 on average. Uh,
Wow.
and so I think there is that spread where it's just if you're making 55 versus 85, that's the difference between investing not impacting you long term because you're living paycheck to paycheck, and then being able to invest a few grand a month that'll turn into a few million, and that's your nest egg for retirement. So just
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
make more money. I did want to tell you actually about the nuclear event that I went to in Austin.
yeah.
There was an interesting speaker there that was. I can send you the company later, but he runs one of the largest data center companies in the world. Uh, Including his company owns the largest nuclear, or excuse me, the largest data center campus, as they call them, or kind of like plant in the US. So it's this like football fields of just data racks, right? It's just a ridiculous scale. And he was speaking. So that event was for Allo Atomics, which is a kind of SMR, a micro reactor, kind of modular nuclear power plant company. And he was speaking there so positively about Allo. It was a really really good speech he gave, where he was saying like this is the solution that we're all looking for. Where he said everyone I know in the data center business, right? My company, all my friends, etc. We need power, right? The grid just isn't doing it. Like the principal impediment to these data centers being built is just energy. And he was like, the moment we get SMRs online, I'm sticking them next to all of my data centers. Everyone's going to use them. It was this very interesting, just this positivity that I think was embodied by a lot of people at the event. So there's potential investments there, I think, although that is somewhat difficult, but just the scale of that as well, and that ties into what we were saying on construction as well, and just like the moment energy is solved as a bottleneck, then what does that do to construction and what's built? And it feels like we are on the precipice of energy just being solved, whether it's fission, whether it's fusion, just whatever that looks like.
Yeah, no, 100%. Do you do you find interest in that space enough to like? Because what do you have left until you graduate? I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about like your personal life on in front of all the viewers, but you graduate in like what, like 8 months?
Yeah, I graduate soon. You can't talk about my personal life. I think the next video going out on YouTube is my productivity experience advice as a college student. So, yeah, exactly. I graduate soon, and then there is that question of, well, what do I want to put my time into? And deep tech is just appealing, right? Like so much of, especially our work is online, and you can't hold it and you can't touch it, and
Yeah.
social media, writing, like software, SaaS, sales, it's all digital, and there is this, I think, intrinsic appeal to just building something that you can touch,
Yeah.
and that impacts the world viscerally in that way. It's
Yeah.
like the real estate versus stock market dichotomy, where people like real estate in a lot of ways because you can feel it and you can touch it. So yeah, maybe they'll end up just working on reactors. We'll see.
Yeah. Interesting. Wait, would you say that your interest would be actually the design and engineering aspect of it, or would you take your skill sets in, say marketing or some kind of niche that you've already explored in life and apply that to deep tech?
Yeah, I wish I was an engineer at this point, but I don't think that's in the works for me. But there's a lot of, I think what I do see at a lot of deep tech startups, and there's actually an event that I may be going to shortly. That's like 4 days of just deep tech conferences that I'm looking forward to. It's a lot of engineers and no one else than engineers at a company, which is great when you're building and you're solving and tackling really complex technical problems. But there is this whole go-to-market validation kind of scale phase where you do need other people than the engineers themselves to go and just turn an invention, right? It's kind of like the Tesla problem, turn an invention into a commercial product, right? Like Edison versus Tesla in that way. So I think there's room there for people who are interested in deep tech, including myself, right? Um, that aren't principally engineers or technical people.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've never heard the Edison versus Tesla analogy, but that makes sense. Yeah, that's how you got screwed.
exactly. Like Edison arguably was less of the pure inventor, so to speak, right? But he was a hell of a salesperson and right, like he ran a whole lab, right, where he had just people just pumping out these patents and products, and that's
Yeah,
why I think you see a lot of his inventions under his name today. Like the Edison company, I believe, is still around, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So,
interesting. Huh.
uh, but Tesla lives on in other ways, obviously. Did you see the 20% the pump in Tesla, the stock price? After
Recently?
Yeah, after the robo-taxi,
What?
20% in a day, it erased the losses for the year. It was the most bullish. I misspoke there. It wasn't a result of the robotaxi event, but the earnings
Yeah, I
for
was gonna say because Robotaxi was 2 weeks ago. That was 3 days ago. The
exactly.
20.
It was the most bullish earnings call in years, and some people are saying like ever. So
What
uh,
what is bullish mean? Like the earnings
Like
hold up?
positive.
Really? So
Yeah.
what did they reveal that happened?
That their ride sharing app has been actually used throughout the last year. It's not just a demo, like they've been using it around their factory, I believe in Austin. They're looking to scale the lower cost models like this next year and actually not just start to produce them, but again, produce them at scale. Um, Generally, just a lot of the real kind of down play of Tesla stock in over the last year or two has just been people want the cheaper car that's mass produced and like the Model 3, whatever you want to call it, and there hasn't been a lot of talk about that, and that's also why after the robotaxi event, the stock just went uh,
Yeah.
down. Just it took a pretty hard hit there. But a lot of this event was just we're cutting costs. For example, the cost to produce I forget exactly which car, but it's down 30% in the past year. So their earnings per share was like a 40% beat, which is insane. Like they missed on revenue slightly, but a 40%
Yeah.
earnings per share beat is just
That
insane.
is-
So they're making money and they plan on just making a lot more on the volume side of things.
wow. That's crazy. Yeah, they're all, I mean, they're not almost at a trillion, but they're getting there.
Yeah,
For market cap. Well,
exactly. So
that's
yeah, I do want to run through a few more kind of ideas, especially the business ideas that we had potentially slotted to discuss, and that I just want to hear your thoughts on these really. And I know we are running on to time here. First of those, so you know that you know indie hacking as a like little fan community online.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I there's this guy named Mark Lou. He's like this French guy, I think that makes YouTube videos and is big on Twitter and kind of just goes and builds and ships things, really fast. So I was inspired a month ago to start just like, hey, let me see if I can build a few things and just ship them just for fun, right? Not as like a making money type thing. Um, so there's a big client of ours on the marketing side of things. I won't say their name, but Blake, they're I can put it in the chat, but their logo's green if that gives you
Yeah.
an idea.
Yeah.
Um, those two of the websites I built are now doing more organic traffic than that website than their
Wow.
website, which gives you an idea of the scale, right?
Yeah.
And that they're both pulling like several thousand impressions a day at like 0.5% up to 2% click-through rates. Two of the so one of the websites is it showcases the revenue of companies. So if you search like what is the revenue of X, Y, and Z, it has a much nicer like formatted version of that versus what you normally see, and it has fun stats like this is how much they make per minute per employee, right? Things like that. And then the other is the more in the construction space. It's for GCs to review each other. So there's a few other very like micro app kind of indie hacked ideas that I have. If you want to build it and you're listening to this, go ahead. Otherwise, I may do so. One of those is a subscript app. In that, I'm an economics major. I think you are you an econ major?
Yeah,
Okay.
or econ minor marketing major.
Okay. So for econ, for a lot of formulas, over the last 2 years, I've been trying to, well, I always have to copy and paste subscripted text or like Greek, like symbols, say delta, for example, into like equations that I'm writing, or especially on like homework platforms, for example. So I want to build a better, cleaner version of subscripts and superscripts that also has a base in equations.
Mhm.
And I think there's a programmatic SEO element that I think the current sites that try and do that haven't done well. And by that I mean just instead of one page that's this is my subscript and superscript app, it would you create 1,000 pages. In
Mhm.
one page, it's all the same tool, right? The same like text entry converts it into subscript, superscript, whatever it may be. But the title of the page for the SEO side, and you throw some other custom elements in there as well, is superscript and then insert character. So like superscript delta, superscript beta, superscript L, like the letter, and then
Mm.
subscript, and then the same thing. So you create like 5,000 pages like this that are all different characters, where it's valuable. It solves the problem of the user, so people should engage with it well. And then you just index all 5,000 of those pages, and then now when people search, no one, some people generically search for subscript tool or subscript app or whatever it may be. But a lot of the times people search for superscript and then the character they want a superscript. And that way you're much more likely to rank for those specific searches. You avoid a lot of the competition, and maybe you get a lot of traffic that way that you can monetize down the line. So that's my first indie hack.
Someone just stole it from you. Someone online.
Friendly competition, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wait, did you have any others on there?
I think so. For one of the websites that I built, I needed data about companies, like the company revenue site, right? So I was playing around with GPT and generating some scripts to scrape Wikipedia, and then I did some custom work on top of that. And it turns out it's so easy to scrape information from Wikipedia, like in bulk. So there has to be applications for that data where I think if you just sit around all day and figure out some better way of bundling that information, just go and get the data that you need from Wikipedia and then go and create whatever you can that bundles that better. I think there's a whole host of apps, products, etc., that could be built around data that you can get from Wikipedia.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it'd be like kind of bundling Wikipedia's information and formats, etc., into a more concise version based off the prompt given from the user. Is it still that?
Well, again, I'll give you the example of the company revenues website. My premise there is if you're searching for how much annual revenue does a company do, you want the information. You also just want a fun, engaging experience. And maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised if you see some derivative stats like, again, money per minute, for example. With this annual revenue, they could buy this many baseball stadiums, and then also leaderboards. So you can type in your city and see a leaderboard for the amount of revenue companies are doing near you, right? So like gamifying it in that way. So all that really is just bundling company information that's already out there on different websites. So as an example, if you wanted to scale this up, and I didn't get the data that way for this, but you certainly could go to Wikipedia, scrape information about 1 million companies, repurpose some of it, like the descriptions. You obviously just can't like copy and paste that. But then take that data, bundle it in a nicer way, and then you can get a lot of organic traffic that way. The long term you monetize in some way.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying there as far as the approach goes?
Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting.
So, yeah.
Huh. Yeah, definitely not a low hanging fruit for anyone starting out though, just like any of these ideas.
Well, I don't know. I think if you, I mean, a lot of this, like just the AI, as far as the technical side of it goes, it obviously helps to know the programming behind it, but it can be done. I think
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. One other my last indie hack kind of idea here. You know the rice purity test.
Yes.
Everyone knows the rice purity test. It's a cultural phenomenon that was invented as a kind of science test in a sense, or to just assess maturity, right? Like a university put it out and it became this challenge in a sense, which I disagree with on ethical grounds, but it's very popular. And I don't see a lot of parallel offers or kind of experiments, surveys like that. So what I'm thinking, well, what if you created a life experience app that's like the rice purity test, but it's your general life experience, right? As in the rice test focuses on like sex, drugs, that whole bundle of kind of life experiences. What if you generalize that to, well, how many countries have you been to? Have you started a family, right? Have you had a close family member die? Like whatever it may be that signifies life experience and maturity in that sense. I think if
Mm.
you made that you that needs to be shareable. It needs to be like intensely shareable and also gameable in that in the same way that the rice test people view it as a challenge. You want people to view that as a challenge. But I think if you did just, I wonder, copy the rice purity format and replicate it with life experience, or maybe any kind of other survey, could you see a lot of the same shareable aspects of it drive word of mouth and growth because people just share it?
Interesting. If it didn't work, that would be a little scary based off how, like, society would prefer to, kind of